The framework of the Nairobi Convention is a legal framework that has been in place for the Western Indian Ocean for the last 40 years. It's a framework that has grown in strength, particularly because the countries have invested quite a lot of trust and efforts and commitment into making this legal framework the framework through which they govern the marine and coastal environment. In order to underpin the legal framework and all of the works that the Nairobi Convention does in its protocol, we need to have solid science. And that is where the role of the Regional African Task Force on Science comes in. Nairobi has been a very important part of this trajectory, alongside with WIOMSA. You can say in a way that Nairobi Convention and WIOMSA have grown up together. So in the science policy interface that we see between them and the amount of scientists that we see in this conference here, we can really tell that they have influenced quite a lot of the global processes, and they have adapted them to the regional and national processes. To give you a couple of examples, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework needs to be adapted in terms of its goals into a regional context. And the Nairobi Convention has been able to do that with its parties at the last Conference of Parties, number 11, that was held last year. The parties came together, they decided how can we push the goal on the 30 by 30 in terms of protected areas, and how do we make sure that the marine protected areas, which are coming live now, can contribute to achieving that 30 by 30 goal. On the BBNJ negotiations, we're very happy. And we can't deny that this is a significant piece of legislation that has taken over 10 years to achieve. Nairobi Convention has been working with the parties in order to ensure that the parties have the awareness and the importance, and that they go through the entire ratification process to get and to ratify the BBNJ agreement. Now, the significance of the agreement cannot be understated. This is, in fact, a biodiversity-related MEA. We have the structures within the Nairobi Convention to help and assist countries to really deliver on that element of biodiversity in the high seas. And we actually see the connectivity because the biodiversity in the oceans is very fluid. It's very transboundary. And therefore, the Nairobi Convention is able to provide the elements and the tools and the networks in order to make these kind of articulations of marine protected areas, which are inside natural jurisdiction, and how can they be expanded into the high seas. So I think that there's a lot of elements of linking the right science with the processes already built into the convention. And then lastly, I would mention that regional ocean governance is a very important element. If you look into what was the main challenge, I would say, in terms of the oceans that we have nowadays, it's a fragmentation of governance. The fisheries regime really doesn't communicate with the coastal and marine environment regime, and we need to make sure that we articulate both. There is a regional strategy on ocean governance here in this region, the WIO region, which builds together the regional fish bodies and the regional seas to come together to have joint activities and coordination, not only at the regional level, but also importantly at the national level. And that's really where we're heading to. The outcomes that are coming out of the 13th Symposium of WIOMSA, some of the recommendations are going to be taken up by the policy framework of the Nairobi Convention. In a way, that is the reason why you have WIOMSA 1 year before the 12th COP of the Nairobi Convention, so that we can bring the latest science to the policymakers, and we will see it in the coming days how this begins to articulate already here in this symposium, but we will see the consolidation of that at the COP12 in Tanzania next year. It's really underpinning the science. If you provide policymakers with the right science for their decision makers and to make sure that they understand the impacts at the community level, I think that's a very powerful statement. If you look into the impacts of climate change and how local communities need to adapt to climate change and how their fisheries are being impacted by a loss of coral reef or a decline in fish stocks, those are the kind of conversations that we need to have through science. And so I think that WIOMSA provides that vehicle for conversations, for discussion that brings together not only the scientific community, but also the civil society organizations and the communities. Another very important element which has been very nice to see, it has been the empowerment of youth. And I have seen youth standing up before 1,000 people, presenting about their master's thesis or their PhD thesis, and having a dialogue and basically presenting to top scientists in the region. And so that has been a very pleasant surprise to see them so empowered and so passionate. That gives me quite a lot of hope that this region is onto something in that strengthening of the science for improving the policy making. And I actually hope to be able to replicate and take the example from the Western Indian Ocean and replicate it to other regions in the world using the framework of the Regional Seas Program.